Weeks after an immigration raid at a Hyundai LG battery factory near Savannah, Governor
with President Trump's growing nationwide immigration crackdown.
Just after dawn in rural Georgia, workers are filing into the massive new Hyundai Metaplant, a sprawling 3,000-acre construction site. They're here to build the future, an electric vehicle battery plant, part of a $7.6 billion project, the largest in the state's history. But what they don't know is that their shift is about to be violently interrupted. Suddenly, the site is swarming with helicopters and federal vehicles. Hundreds of agents from a dozen agencies, including ICE, the FBI, and the DEA, pour out, armed and holding restraints. This isn't an inspection. It's the beginning of the largest single-site workplace raid in the history of U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. So, how did we get here? How did a project celebrated by state officials as a landmark that would bring 8,500 jobs turn into this? It all comes down to pressure. To meet aggressive production timelines, Hyundai and its partner, LG Energy Solution, relied on a complex web of contractors and subcontractors to staff the site quickly. And that rush to build created the perfect storm. A months-long investigation zeroed in on illegal hiring practices. Authorities alleged that hundreds of workers were on site in violation of U.S. immigration law. Many were South Korean nationals working on short-term business or tourist visas that don't permit manual labor. Others were from Latin American countries. Investigators even discovered cases where smaller staffing firms looked the other way, cutting corners on paperwork to keep the project moving. By the time federal agents launched their raid, the plant had already drawn scrutiny from labor advocates and local media, who warned that the sheer pace of construction made compliance nearly impossible. Prosecutors now argue that the layers of subcontracting blurred accountability, leaving Hyundai and LG to deny direct responsibility while insisting they relied on contractors to follow the law. That gap between corporate oversight and on-the-ground practices is exactly what critics say allowed the violations to spiral unchecked. That explosion happened on September 4th, 2025. In what one worker described to CNN as a war zone, more than 500 federal and state officials descended on the plant in what ICE later confirmed was the largest single-site immigration raid in U.S. history. Panic erupted. Some workers tried to run, with reports of people hiding in ventilation shafts and even a sewage pond to escape capture. But for nearly 500 people, there was no way out. A total of 475 were rounded up, patted down, and shackled at their wrists, ankles, and waists before being loaded onto buses under heavy security. The detainees were transported to a detention center in Folkestone, Georgia, leaving families in crisis, desperately trying to get information and scrambling to understand their loved ones' legal status. Attorneys working with advocacy groups later described chaotic scenes outside detention centers, where relatives gathered for hours seeking updates, underscoring the human toll behind the record-breaking raid.
It's a crime to enter this country illegally. Number two, it's a crime to knowingly hire an illegal alien. And these companies that hire illegal aliens, they undercut the competition that's paying U.S. citizen salaries.
The raid was just the beginning. The fallout was immediate and international. The detention of over 300 South Korean workers sent shockwaves back to Seoul, creating a serious diplomatic headache. The timing was especially damaging, coming just weeks after South Korea's president pledged billions in American investments. Facing public outrage, Seoul scrambled to respond, with the government eventually chartering a plane to repatriate its citizens. Back in the U.S., the raid exposed a deep conflict between corporate promises and immigration enforcement. Hyundai and LG Energy Solution quickly distanced themselves, stating the detained workers were not their direct employees and promising to review their subcontractors. Meanwhile, a leaked internal document obtained by The Guardian suggested at least one worker was detained despite having a valid visa, fueling criticism of ICE's tactics. For workers from other nations, their futures were left in legal limbo, with attorneys warning of months-long detention proceedings. The UAW, the Auto Workers Union, released a statement condemning the situation, declaring, "Workers are not the problem. Exploitative corporations are advocacy groups in both the US and South Korea echoed that sentiment, demanding greater oversight of multinational supply chains and transparency in how labor is sourced." Construction at the Metaplant was temporarily halted and has since restarted, but the raid left questions that won't go away. The incident strained diplomatic relations and caused other South Korean companies to reportedly suspend some projects in the US. It forces us to ask a tough question. In the global race for industrial dominance, who really pays the price? The corporations making promises, the governments enforcing laws, or the hundreds of workers caught in the middle? For more investigations that uncover the stories shaping our world, subscribe to the channel.